This is Ed Driscoll for PJmedia.com, and we're talking with Lisa Kennedy Montgomery, better known as simply Kennedy. She was a VJ with MTV during the last period that everybody still wanted their MTV. And now, among other things, she produces and stars in videos for Reason TV. And she's the author of The Kennedy Chronicles, the golden age of MTV through rose-colored glasses. It's published by Thomas Dunn Books and available from Amazon.com and your local bookstore. And Kennedy, thanks for stopping by today.
Thanks, Ed. How's it going?
Okay. Kennedy, I think for most young people, if you were a red-blooded American teenager in the 1980s, chances are at some point, you not only wanted your MTV, you wanted to work there, either behind or ideally in front of the cameras. Kennedy, as somebody who got to live the dream, could you talk about your journey to MTV and how you ultimately got the gig?
Yeah, it came as a surprise, especially to me. I was going to say even to me, but I think I was more surprised than anyone. I had been interning at a radio station and got a job as a part-time DJ, and as luck would have it, the program director who hired me, he moved to MTV and became the senior vice president of programming. And then when he had been there for a few months, he offered me a job. So I did an audition, and it was kind of crazy.
What was the transition from audio DJ to MTV VJ like? And did working at MTV, at least initially, seem like what you expected it to be?
Yeah, it was definitely what I expected. It was everything I expected and more. It was fast. There were big personalities. It was pretty awesome. But I don't know how I made the transition. It was so crazy because I was good with my voice, but I was so stiff. And my mom was so uncomfortable when she'd watch me, and she thought I was so sad because I didn't smile because I didn't want to come off as phony. So I just looked really glib and depressed. And then someone gave me a copy of Roger Ailes' book, You Are the Message. And, you know, there's a lot of stuff in there about how to be a TV presenter, like how to use your face and your body and all of those things naturally so you come across as kind of an appealing presenter.
Now, you're on the Fox Business Channel these days. Have you told Roger Ailes that his book helped launch your career as an MTV VJ?
Yeah, he and I were some of the very first guests on Politically Incorrect when it was on Comedy Central. And it was 3 years before he had started Fox News, and I took him a copy of the book to sign, and he signed my copy of the book, and we have kept in touch over the years.
In the Kennedy Chronicles, you described quite a dramatic coming out as someone who is not a cast-in-the-mold liberal in late 1992 or early 1993.
I got to MTV when Clinton fever was in full swing because the Choose or Lose campaign had been going on at MTV. And, there was just such a fervor there for this presidential candidate, for the Democratic nominee. And he was playing ball with MTV. It was a really intelligent move on the part of the Clinton campaign. And, I wouldn't credit MTV fully with Clinton's election. I think that's a foolish, simplistic thing to do. But it certainly signaled a generational shift in politics and taking younger voters seriously. And MTV wanted to put forth some really, kind of credible election coverage, and the Clinton campaign wanted to reach the MTV generation being staffed by, 30-something, some 20-something. And so, that marriage was born. But, I came from the right. At the time, I was a confessed Republican, and that's what I had always been because, in my mind at the time, the only thing that existed was a two-party system, and it wasn't until later that, I was brought to the light of what it meant to be a libertarian. And, I'm really happy now to see what's happening with students and the liberty movement because they have so many choices, and, they're voicing their true beliefs. They're not being told what to believe or who to vote for. And, they're taking back college campuses. And it's a really wonderful thing to see. Like, it's the most energized political generation that I've come across. Because, being a Gen Xer, we're pretty apathetic. But it's so amazing to see people out there who consider themselves libertarians, from the left and from the right, but they're very consistent in their beliefs in true liberty and freedom.
So how did you become first a conservative and then a libertarian in the music business, particularly given the unbelievable peer pressure there must have been to conform to the industry's liberal groupthink?
It would have been a lot easier, I think, especially in the beginning, to just be a full-blown liberal, but I felt like I was compromising my beliefs, my belief in the free market and a consistency of ideas because, the left talks about certain types of freedom, but, both the left and the right become very hypocritical when they're pushed on the issue. And, I saw that really quickly, especially when it came to free speech and the environment and things like that. And, there were so many bands telling you what to believe, and there was zero curiosity and zero tolerance for people who had differing beliefs. And I always thought that was hypocritical and unfair.
Huh. I would have thought that your fellow talent at MTV and in the rest of the media would have been extremely tolerant at discovering that MTV was much more politically diverse than they first thought, right?
There are people at MTV who were certainly encouraging and accepting, and they probably laughed behind my back, but they didn't haze me. It didn't really become an issue until I signed my second contract in 1995, and then they put a clause in there that I wasn't allowed to go on and talk about politics unless I had prior consent from the network. And I know no one else had that clause in their contract. But by and large, they were cool, and as long as I represented my beliefs as my own, they were fine.
Kennedy, I watched your recent interview on C-SPAN's Book TV, and you said something to Peter Slen, the interviewer, that I was hoping you could elaborate on. You had said, quote, "Tom Morello from Rage Against the Machine has an ideology which is very confining, and in his world, if you don't agree with him, you are the enemy. There's very little room for actual free thought. I found that to be hypocritical. When I came across people like that, I would call them on it." Unquote. Could you talk about how a hardcore socialist ideology is very quote-unquote confining?
It is because there's zero acceptance, there's zero tolerance for someone who might have a belief system that evolved from a different set of life experiences. And that's the thing about politics. Like, we're so judgmental of each other when really, some of that judgment needs to be replaced with curiosity. And I find far less of that on the far left. And, these are people who claim that they're fighting for people's rights and fighting for people's freedoms. But, it's a very narrow fight. And, and truly, if you voice anything that they perceive as criticism, to them it's an attack, and and that's one of the reasons that we're in such a sorry state as far as a national political discourse. And I have friends who are libertarians who really they run the gamut as far as their life influences and what they truly believe. But, in the end, it comes down to, even if I don't agree with you, I will still fight for your freedom to choose whatever you want to do with your own life, as long as it doesn't affect me.
And even beyond the politics, in his autobiography, Keith Richards talks about what a prig Mick Jagger can be and describes him as a long-suffering victim of LVS, or lead vocalist syndrome. In your book, many of the frontmen you describe meeting are even bigger jerks than Mick, to use a family-friendly word. Is that a defense mechanism? Is it a pose?
No, I think if you're the lead singer in a group, whatever, how big, how small, however long you've been around, there's inherent narcissism there. It's just the way it is. Like, if you wanna stand on stage and say, "Hey, look at me," you really can't be a successful, charismatic, entertaining lead singer without that. And, look at David Lee Roth. He's probably a total pain in the ass to hang out with, but man, Van Halen is sure entertaining.
In contrast, perhaps because he's a guitarist and not a lead singer, Dweezil Zappa comes across as quite a sympathetic character in your book, whom you knew while his father was in his last days.
Yeah, Dweezil's an amazing person, and, he's super introspective, and, it comes from such an incredible family where, they openly talked about politics, and they made fun of politicians across the board, and it was really funny because I always saw people in the political realm, really, they were always intrigued by Frank, and they always kind of wanted his blessing. And that's because he was, Frank was so uncompromising and so legit, and he passed that on to his children, especially Dweezil. Dweezil is a remarkable, creative human being. He's such a good person, and he was raised really well. And people thought that Frank Zappa was this insane person, but he was a truly dedicated family man, and you could see that just entering into their house, how much love there was. And it's like, I wanted my family to be like that. I thought I grew up in a normal family, and, from the outside looking in, you would think they're strange, but it was actually a very tight-knit group. It was very beautiful to witness.
Later in the Kennedy Chronicles, it seems to me that you described Tabitha Soren, who played a prominent on-air role during the 1992 MTV Choose or Lose campaign, as somewhat of a cautionary career tale. Is that a fair assessment?
I don't know if that would be the case. I mean, there's nothing really cautionary about her career because she was also another uncompromising person. Like, she left MTV, she left broadcasting because she chose to do that. And, that was really what she was telling me. The advice that she gave me was go live an interesting life. Fame, all of this is nonsense. It's total illusion. And, that's why I called that chapter Tabitha Soren, because, here she is, like, transforming into the Buddha before my eyes and ears. And she's telling me, I thought that she was a backpack, really ambitious career woman, but it turns out, like, as soon as she fell in love and got married, like, she followed her passions to Stanford and Berkeley, and, she's an incredible photographer, and she has 3 kids. And I have a lot of respect for that. It's much easier to get on the hamster wheel and chase the cheese and have an unfulfilling yet professionally successful life. And it really speaks for someone who totally unplugs and goes out and lives a life that they want. And, that's the fact that I was able to move to Seattle and leave MTV really at my height was, I credit Tabitha for that.
And let's move things forward into the present day. But first, do you ever hear from your fellow VJs?
Yeah, I do. I talk to a lot of people. I talk to a lot of people who were not on camera. I talked to John Stencio, who just had a tremendous battle with a rare form of carcinoma that almost took his life. And in the book I write about, John was one of my fellow VJs from Massachusetts. He and I started really close to each other. And he was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma when he was at MTV, and he was only like 24 years old. And he lost most of his hair. Whatever hair he had left, they glued it back on his head. And, he was one of those people, this incredible triumph of the human spirit. Just watching him was incredibly moving because, his body was becoming so frail, but he insisted on working the whole time. He wanted to stay on camera, so he would go to class and get sick and come back. And, he would work the rest of the week. And he ended up battling another kind of carcinoma just last year that was so devastating. And he went through, months where they did not know if he was going to make it. And he has successfully beaten cancer again. And I'm so happy to know him. I'm so happy to be connected to him. And I talk to Bill Bellamy. I see Carson daily, at least a couple times a week, which is so funny. And I talk to Kurt Loder. I always have dinner with Kurt Loder when I'm in New York. There's quite a few people that I keep in touch with. And, also through the miracle of Facebook, we have some MTV Facebook groups where people post funny things and pictures. It's pretty great.
Now, Kurt Loder is also a contributor to Reason, like yourself.
Yeah, Kurt's awesome. And he was the one who brought me into the light of libertarian being.
Compared to the MTV craziness, how are things in front of the cameras and microphones today?
It's really fun because, one of the great things about new media and technology is it allows you to create your own identity and interests. And, whatever you want to do, if you have the resources, you can go out and do it. And, it's thanks to editing software and the immediacy of all these tools and a place to put it. And, I have very distinct jobs. It's like when I go out and shoot for Stoffel on Fox Business, I go as his reporter. I am John's proxy. Like, I go out and I get the story that John wants to tell. And, when I do stuff for Reason, it's a different and wider scope. And, there's a different kind of latitude, but, you also have to, we may be a little looser with the content, but you also have to respect what Reason is about, because Reason is its own institution, and it's an incredibly creative place. And, I love going out with Jim Gillespie and Nick Gillespie and writing all sorts of stuff. It's so satisfying, and I did not foresee this much activity in my career even 10 years ago, and I'm really happy for it. And, I'm still connected to music through iHeartRadio and through Alt 98.7, which is my radio station in LA. I do mornings there. And, being able to still be passionately involved in politics and music, I'm so happy for that. And, I love upsetting people. I love soaking people out. Anytime you can get an emotional reaction, good or bad, it's something successful for me.
This is Ed Driscoll, and we've been talking with Kennedy, formerly with MTV and now with Reason TV and the Fox Business Channel. She's the author of The Kennedy Chronicles, The Golden Age of MTV Through Rose-Colored Glasses. It's published by Thomas Dunn Books and available from Amazon.com and your local bookstore. And Kennedy, thanks once again for stopping by pjmedia.com today.
Thanks, Ed. I really appreciate it. Thanks for your time.